a Hungarian chicken mushroom paprika with some Gouda polenta and a lime blueberry scone. Using our sourdough discard because it is finally firming up. So let's start by getting our back burner on and our polenta ready. We're gonna do a Gouda polenta. I'm doing 2 cups of milk with 2 cups of water, and then we're gonna bring that to a boil, and then we'll add in 1 cup of our grits to it, or our polenta. Polenta and grits are pretty interchangeable. So once that's to a boil, we'll add in our polenta. While we're waiting for that to kind of bring up to a boil, I am going to start working on my blueberry lime sourdough scones using our sourdough discard, because these will need to bake, and then we'll work on the sauce base for our chicken mushroom paprika. So we're gonna start out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. This is going to be the base of our scones, and we're gonna cut our butter into it. So I've got 1 and 2. Slide this guy out of the way. We're gonna add in a 1/2 cup of sugar. We're gonna do our dry ingredients here, and we'll cut our butter into it, and then we'll add our wet ingredients. So we want a 1/2 cup of sugar. Here we go. And if you've never really had a scone before, my best way to kind of compare it is a mixture of a biscuit and a cookie. So it's got a little sweetness, but not as sweet as a cookie, and it kind of has that fluffiness of a biscuit, but you have a nice crunch on the outside. Okay, now we're gonna add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So we've got 1 and 2. And then we want about a teaspoon of salt. Letting that going in. There we go. I'm gonna pop it up. Make sure. That was my camping one, so it got a little humid, and I'm like, gotta use it up before it turns into a salt block. Okay, let's give this a nice little mix around with my pastry cutter. Kind of get that baking powder, salt, and sugar all mixed up. There we go. And then we're going to cut in a 1/2 stick of butter into our not a 1/2 stick, a stick of butter, 1/2 cup of butter into our scone mixture. We're gonna use our pastry cutters for it. And this will kind of be our little treat for our lunch today of our Hungarian mushroom paprika with Gouda grits, or Gouda polenta. I'm gonna slice it up like this. This is just gonna make it easier when I go in with my pastry cutter to get it broken up, because you wanna have this in pieces smaller than a pea when you're done cutting it up. Now, I like to do it the old kind of fashioned way with just a pastry cutter, but if you wanted to, you could get out a food processor and kind of spin it a couple of times until your butter is cut up into the flour. But I find it doesn't take very long to do it with our pastry cutter here, which has 5 kind of blades on it. And it's kind of like the brass knuckles of baking. And you're just simply gonna push it down into the butter, and it slices the butter up into small pieces. And that way your butter is gonna be throughout your mixture, which will give you those kind of fluffy layers. But I think this is the easiest way. If you don't have a pastry cutter or a food processor at home, you could do it the old school way, which is you take 2 butter knives and you just keep slicing it up. And then I find then if you kind of go in with your fingers and then like smush any of those bigger pieces, that works well. But the pastry cutters, I think, works faster than a food processor. By the time you get everything out, you'll have this mix the butter cut into it faster. Here we go. And then I'm gonna go through with my knife here, and I'm gonna just clear out any butter that I have stuck in here, because I want to cut it all up. It's if you have a couple chunks that are a little bit bigger, those will just kind of be more of like a butter void in your thing. But again, you want those a little bit up, because that's gonna help lead to your kind of fluffy layers in your scone. Okay. Just about cut up here, and I am starting to hear a little simmer on my water and milk for our Gouda grits. So let's take a quick pause. Yep, I've got a nice starting to simmer here. So we're gonna get a cup. Got my measuring cup right here. And got my grits or my polenta. And we're gonna do 1 cup of this. And polenta, this is just corn, like ground up corn. You know, the same thing as grits. Most of the time grits you use white corn for it. Polenta you use yellow. But they're really similar. You know, with polenta you typically hear until it's got a creamier consistency on there. So we're gonna add this in to our milk. And then once it comes to a nice boil, we will turn our heat down nice and low. And we're gonna let it simmer on low for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll add our cheese in the very end. You don't wanna add your cheese in the beginning, otherwise you'll risk burning it at the bottom. So we'll add it in towards the very end. And I'm going to put in a little bit of garlic salt, which will go well with my kind of the Gouda cheese. We're gonna add in about a teaspoon, and that will give it also a nice kind of little garlicky flavor, which I think will go great with our Hungarian chicken mushroom paprika. Let's let it boil and then we'll put the lid on. Okay, now that we've got our butter cut into our flour here, we're gonna work on the wet base to our scones. So I'm gonna slide that out here to the side. We're just gonna use our little measuring cup that we had the water in. And we're gonna start out with a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. So I fed mine last night after we made those biscuits, and it popped up pretty well. As you can see, it kind of bubbled over. So I think after I feed it after today, I should be able to start up on a sourdough loaf. You know, I had to do a little rehab because it was in my cooler over vacation. And it didn't get as much love as I normally give it. So we're gonna add in a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. And so I'm gonna add this in here. Scrape it all out. Don't want any of it to go to waste. And then I'm gonna move mine over here because, you know, I'm always paranoid that I'm gonna drop it and break it. And I literally did that right before we left on vacation. I had like fed it, was going to put my 2nd jar into the fridge, and it broke everywhere. It was so sad. Okay, we've got a nice little simmer on here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this down to low. We're gonna put our lid on. We're gonna let it kind of slowly cook with our lid on. This is actually, I've got a nice little hole in here which will let some of that extra steam out so it won't hopefully boil over. We're gonna add in 1 egg. And about 2 tablespoons of cream. So we've got 1 and 2. Let me grab a small spoon to kind of mix this up. Actually, I'll do a fork because I can pop that yolk. I'm gonna pop that yolk and then we're gonna mix it up. And then we're gonna add in our lime juice and zest for this. We're gonna use 1 lime for going into the scone mixture, and then the other one is gonna be for our glaze. We wanna make sure we got that egg and all of that mixed up together. And let me grab my juicer here. But we're gonna zest first. You always wanna zest first because it's much harder to zest after you've cut in half and you've squeezed the juice out. You don't have anything firm holding it. So I'm gonna zest my lime up. I'm actually using a Parmesan grater. It works really great for zesting. I don't think I ever use it for Parmesan cheese. But it gives you like the perfect size little bits of lime. Sometimes I have this other zester, but it gives me like almost like lemon curls or lime curls. This gives you nice tiny little bits, which will give you a lot of flavor. Now we're gonna put some lime, the whole lime juice or juice from the lime in here, but most of the lime flavor is actually gonna come from the zest. It gives you more of that nice flavors.
You have a question. Where do you post your recipes?
Our recipes, we always post our videos, which have I go through my detailed recipes on there. We do also have recipe cards that we put for our members. Recipe cards take me about an hour to do one, so that's kind of extra work. So that's why we have it in our members for it, and we post there. We do occasionally also throw out some freebies every now and then, especially some of our really popular recipes. But we do upload the videos for everyone on the link on our page, so you can always recreate them from the videos. Okay, we're getting almost all of this zest in here, and then of course, plenty on the counter. So we've got our lime zest, and now we're gonna cut our lime open. Let me grab a little knife over here, and we're gonna squeeze that juice in there. One thing that's nice about limes is they rarely have seeds in them. It's not like a lemon where you have to worry about having so much. And we're gonna juice this whole lime in here for it, and that will help give a little bit more lime flavor. But again, that zest is where it's really gonna come out, versus in the glaze, the lime juice will be really, really prominent. And let's get this guy going. And you're just kind of mushing. You can make sure, I always put the pulp in too, because I think it adds more flavor. Here we go. So we've got our lime juice in here, and this is gonna be the wet base for our lime and blueberry sourdough scones. So we're gonna add this wet base to my dry base, and this is gonna create a dry shag. And we're gonna make sure we don't over mix it when we're doing that, because we want a nice fluffy layered scone versus a hard and dense one. Just get all this goodness out. And then I'm gonna just use my fork here. You could also use a dough whisk to kind of mix it up. But this isn't gonna form a paste at all. It's gonna have a dry shag to it. And you're just gonna kind of mix it until you start to see kind of pretty big clumps. We're gonna do our press and folds, which will give us more shape to it. We're gonna make our pucks for our scones. So right now we're mixing it here, and now we're gonna add in our blueberries. So I've got about a cup of washed blueberries. We're gonna add these in here, and we're just gonna mix it up a little bit more. I try not to add so many blueberries, because when blueberries cook up in the oven, they like to pop. And if you put too many in there, what will happen is you'll get soggy spots. And so I find a cup is just what you need. And this is gonna make 16 mini scones, or you could always make one big scone. Okay, so now we have this dry shag. Do you see how it's crumbly and whatnot? This is where we're gonna be doing our press and folds. Just gonna keep that lime zest there. We'll press it into our mixture. Now the blueberries are gonna run away for a second until we've got them all pressed into it. You don't need it. You're gonna press and fold the dough together. Okay, I think I've got it all in here. And watch, this is gonna be like some acrobatics, making sure these blueberries don't run away. But we're simply gonna press them all. So we're gonna start by giving a firm press. This is creating the layers to our scone. And you might think, oh, this is so dry right now. It's not. That butter, when it goes into the oven, it's gonna melt together. And this is gonna make a nice puck form. We're gonna do 2 mini pucks. So we're just pressing it in, and essentially that flour, or that butter we cut up into the flour, is coming together. And you wanna use that cold butter in the beginning, because it creates those flaky layers with the press and the folds. So you see how I'm picking it up, and then I'm kind of putting it on top. Don't knead. Press, press, and then fold. And you see it comes together and it forms. And now that I've got kind of the base to it, I'm gonna divide this kind of in half, so I can have about 2 equal pucks. And we're gonna press this down. Let me fold those crumbs in. Any of those crumb bits, you just fold them in, and then you kind of shape. And so you want a nice kind of puck, a round little disc that's about 1 inch or so high. You don't want it too high. And then we'll transfer these in just a second. Looks like one set of scones has a bit more blueberries than the other, so I'm gonna pop over here. I'm gonna press these crumblies in. You see how just pressing, we're not kneading, we're not doing any like super movements other than just firmly pressing down. Those create those flaky layers that you see in biscuits and in scones. So we've got our 2 pucks here. Get all these little extra crumb bits on here. Let me grab my baking sheet that I have. And then this is also called a pastry cutter. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna just slide it underneath here. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a thin spatula. And we're gonna move our puck onto our parchment paper. And that parchment paper is gonna have it so that your scones don't stick to the bottom of your pan. Just makes for easier cleanup and a cleaner baking. Press these here. And then we're going to cut these in each disc, each puck into 8 pieces. So this is gonna give you that traditional kind of circle that's there, like that pie shape that scones look like. Now you could always make 1 big puck and do 8 big scones. I find the mini scones just work out much better. And then you're gonna pull them out so that they kind of crisp up on the insides or the sides of them as well. Here we go. And just slide it under. You can see I cut through a couple blueberries, no big deal. So we've got our scone, our first one spread out. This is gonna allow for better baking than just leaving them right there in the, together. Because then if you don't spread them out, they'll just stick together when they bake. So I'll move this out, make this one a little bit easier to cut. And then I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. And these bake for just 18 minutes. And they're gonna puff up some, so they get to be a bit bigger than this. Gotta get a little bit. Got these 2 a little close. So let's spread them out. Perfect. Now we're gonna brush them with a little bit of cream and sprinkle a little bit of sugar on them. But I'm gonna give my hands a quick rinse. Get some of that pressed off of it. And then I'm going to get my little kind of basting brush. And we just need about a tablespoon of cream, not even. You just want a little bit. This is gonna give a nice little browning edge, like crust to it, because otherwise if you bake it up without, you're gonna get like a blonde crust to it. You could also use an egg wash if you wanted to, but cream I think is cheaper, less waste. So a little brush over the top. Again, you can see we're not using very much, but this will help brown up the top. And then we're gonna sprinkle a little bit of sugar over it. Will probably be less than, a tablespoon for all of them. And that just gives you a little sugar crunch on the top of your scones. Scones tend not to be super sweet. They are mildly sweet. So that adds just a little extra flavor. I am going to be making a glaze, but if you don't like a glaze, you could eat it just the way it is. So let me grab my sugar. And I said, just a little bit. You don't need too much. And we're just gonna sprinkle it over the top of each one. A little bit actually goes a long way. It has a good amount of flavor. But you know how it is, like with muffins, muffin tops are always the best. That's the same with the scones. The scones top is always the best. Okay, so we probably didn't even use a full teaspoon there. Now we're gonna pop these in the oven at 400 for 18 minutes. So they don't take too long to bake, but they will be lightly golden brown on the top and they'll puff up some. We should be able to see those layers. I always like to also bake mine on the top rack in our oven, which is actually placed in my middle, but I don't like to bake it underneath stuff that's already baking. So I'm gonna put my timer for 18 minutes. Going good. And now let's start on the rest of our lunch here. I'm gonna give my polenta a little bit of a stir. You can starting to see it's already starting to thicken up. So I have it on nice and low. I'm gonna let that kind of cook up and thicken up together. And again, towards the very end, we will add in our cheese. So I'm just kind of breaking up any of those really big chunks so that they can all equally soak up that milk and the water. There we go. And give it a stir around so you can see how well it's thickening up there. Okay, let's work on our chicken. We're gonna get our chicken going. We're gonna saute it off and then we will remove it and take it out in a bowl. Let me grab my olive oil.
You have a question? What does polenta taste like?
If you've ever had grits, it tastes very similar to grits. You know, it uses yellow corn, which grits typically use white corn. It has kind of a fluffier texture to it. So it looks thicker, but it's light and fluffy. And it really takes on whatever seasonings you use. It has a very mild seasoning, but you can kind of get a slight corn taste to it. I'm gonna add a little bit of my olive oil in there. We'll have that heat up. And I'm gonna prep my chicken here. We are just going to slice it up. I'm gonna fillet it first in half, and then I'm gonna just slice it up into thin strips that we will sear off after we give it a nice little bit of a seasoning here. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna cook our little chicken strips up first, then we'll remove them, and then we'll cook our onions, our peppers, our mushrooms up, and then we're gonna make a nice kind of sauce using sour cream and paprika and a little bit of regular cream and flour, but it's kind of the traditional like Hungarian paprika sauce. It was one of those meals I loved this when I was a kid. It's just so tasty. And I feel like we'll spoon this over the cheesy polenta, and it's just that the sauce on here goes so well with the polenta. Here we go. So I'm just doing kind of little, not too big of cuts. And then we're gonna do just a really light seasoning on this chicken. I'm gonna put a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. The acid in here, Worcestershire is made with a vinegar, will bind with like the natural fats in the chicken to make it extra juicy. So I put probably about a tablespoon on, but I don't wanna have it drenched in there because I don't want it too wet because we're gonna sear this off in the pan. I'm gonna turn my oil on. I'm gonna have it start heating up on high. We're gonna use some onion powder. Probably gonna use close to a tablespoon. I want it to get nice flavors in there. And then we're gonna use some paprika. And we're gonna probably coat it with about a tablespoon of this as well. We're gonna be using more of it later, but this is to kind of get that initial flavoring on our chicken. And then we're gonna add some garlic salt. A little shake over, probably around a teaspoon. And then let me grab some tongs over here. So grab my spoon rest out and put that on there. And then I'm just gonna kind of coat them all on here. Get all those nice kind of flavors. Make sure we get all those spices on here so we can saute up the chicken and it will have that nice flavor in it. We will be adding it also back into the sauce at the very end, but I always feel like you should season it up with those same flavors. But again, we want more of a dry versus a super wet kind of spicing on it. So you can see it's nice and dry. It's not dripping. And that will allow us to get a nice little quick sear on it. Okay. While our oil heats up, we can start prepping our vegetables.
You have a question. What type of cutting boards are these?
So these are actually two other ones. I got this one from IKEA, and it's big. Nice, I love it. This is my favorite one. I've had this for like 20 years. I got it in college as a Secret Santa gift. But I absolutely love it. It's a plastic one. It's nice and big. I have found like a set similar that I have on my Amazon storefront that I use when I'm at my parents' house. They have like an outdoor kitchen I like to cook at. And it has big ones kind of like this. I always use this one for my meats. If you notice, there's a ridge there. So that will prevent any juices from sliding off, or meat juices or any marinades from going off, which I really like. And then this one I typically use for just my produce because it has, it's nice and flat and lightweight, but very big. So I always try to, I have, my different cutting boards that I use for different things. I will say I have a ridiculous amount of cutting boards. And these are my two favorite over the times. You just get so many. I find wood I like for breads and, things like that. But I do not like my wood for my meats or even my produce because they stain easily. There's a lot of work in washing and cleaning them up. So I tend to kind of keep with these guys. This one's heavy though. We're gonna add our chicken in. We're gonna saute this off. Spread it out. Try to get all the chicken on, just the surface area of the pan so it can sear up nicely. You can already smell that, the paprika smell. It's wonderful. If you've never had paprika, it's a very mild flavor to it, but it's got a savory, kind of almost like a red bell pepper or sweet pepper. I would say more like a sweet pepper, and it's lovely for it. And that's kind of the star of this dish today. So we've got our chicken out here. I'm trying to make sure all the pieces are touching my pan. That way they'll get a nice sear up on them versus if you stack them on top of it, the meat on top will seize and they'll let out your juices and you won't get that nice sear. I'm gonna grab a plate. We'll pull this meat off when it's done cooking to rest, and then we'll add it in towards the end. Let's go, and we're gonna prep. I've got my onions prepped. Now I've got two bell peppers. I've got a red and an orange. I prefer the red and the orange and the yellows over the green. I find that the green is a bit more bitter, so I typically avoid using green.
You spelled that orange?
I call this orange.
What?
This is orange. It could be yellow. It's an orange. It's a marigold. My husband likes to also say that stoplights are orange and not yellow, so we're just going to disregard his comments on color.
If you look at the color, they're orange.
You're wrong. You're wrong. This could be see, this is yellow. This is orange.
The chat's agreeing with you. Whatever.
Yep. The chef knows best.
Oh, you have a question. Have you ever made cookies with beef tallow instead of butter?
So it's really funny. I have not, but I'm actually going to start exploring it. We were at my brother-in-law's, we're at my sister's lake house, and my brother-in-law, and he just started using Wagyu beef towel and everything was delicious. So I actually was like, oh, I'm going to order some of this and try kind of experimenting with it because I think that would be absolutely delicious. So I haven't yet, but that is one of my next journeys that I want to go on and try out is kind of cooking with some beef tallow, especially because I heard that they're starting to fry everything in tallow over certain oils, like Steak and Shake. They fry their fries in beef tallow, so obviously it must be good. Okay, I'm just gonna cut my peppers. I want them about yay big. I don't want them super long like a fajita. A little bit smaller makes it a little bit easier to eat. In here, we're just gonna kind of just chop up. Those are my chops. Now we're gonna get in here. So slice down in here. Chop them up nice and lovely. These will play really well with the paprika flavoring, which I love. This is one of my favorite. I love chicken mushroom paprika. So good. Let's get these guys cut. I'm just making sure I don't have any peppers that are too big that won't be easy to eat on a fork. You don't want to pull up and have like one that big. Okay, our chicken here is looking good. I'm about to flip it. Let's give this another stir. Okay, look at that thickening up now. This is looking beautiful. What I'm going to do, so this isn't a Dutch oven, this is a cast iron pan. I'm going to turn it off right now and let the residual heat continue to soak it up. This way I prevent it from burning and sticking to the bottom. And then when we're ready to add the cheese in, I'll turn the heat back up and do it. But if you can, to keep it nice and low, it's gonna, you'll burn it. So I don't want that. We're gonna flip our chicken here. We can see we're starting to get the whiting around the edges. And look, we've got this nice kind of coloring and this sear on it, which is gonna give you that crusty little flavor that is so good. And the trick is to do this is you don't play with it. You put it in, you make a layer, and then you flip it once it's kind of cooked halfway through. So you can see we've got all of that nice little searing off on it. It's the same with like when you're frying potatoes, like a hash brown. Let them sit and get that heat and fry versus constantly stirring them. I'm gonna lay them out flat. We'll let them sear up there. And then we'll get to our onions and our peppers. I'm gonna chop up my tomatoes. Just gonna take the top off. You could always go in and you don't wanna waste any, and you just kind of take the tip of your knife in and like kind of pull that stem out if you want. That's gonna get, this part will never cook up. It will be hard and crunchy in your tomato, so always core it out. I always try to sometimes be lazy and then somebody will get it and they're like, you didn't decore it. And then I'm just gonna do a very rudimentary dice on here. Nothing too small. I really just, we're getting the flavors from the tomatoes and the acid from the tomatoes that are gonna help make this kind of sauce and delicious. You could always use a can of diced tomatoes for this if you want to, but I always try to use fresh whenever I have it. And this week I went a little crazy and I bought so many tomatoes. I think I ended up with like 6 or 7 pounds of tomatoes in various forms. Because, you know, I feel like tomatoes are just such a summer thing. Just gotta love them. Okay, we've got those. I think our chicken here is looking good, just about ready. Let it kind of simmer for just a second more. I don't want to overcook it because this is all coming back in at the very end. And this will continue to cook even when we remove it from the heat. So I think we are good. I'm going to turn this down just while we are scooping it off. And we're going to rest it on here. And this is for our chicken mushroom paprika. So if you keep the chicken in the whole time, what will happen is your chicken will get really firm and tough because it will be overcooked. So we're just going to sear it off right now, and then we'll throw it back in our sauce towards the end. That way it stays nice and tender and moist. Here we go. So we've got our chicken mushroom, or our chicken with our paprika and onion and Worcestershire seasoning. Now I'm going to add in a little bit more olive oil. As you can see, we don't have much left in here. About a tablespoon. And then I'm going to turn my heat up to about a 5. And we're going to start with our onions. We're going to saute our onions off. Then we'll add in our peppers. And then we'll add in our mushrooms. And then last, our tomatoes. You want to add your tomatoes in last because they will just kind of juice out. And that will cause your thing to get more soupy first. And we want to get them to have a nice sear on them. Let's give this a good stir. Kind of coat them in that olive oil up, and then give a little smack to break them out. And turn it up just to about a 7 now. The onions, when I add them into the pan, since they're cold, it kind of cools down the whole pan. And I want to have a nice hot on these so I can get them seared. We're not going to completely caramelize them. We're essentially going to cook them until they're no longer white. They start to get translucent. So if you look in here, some of the onions are more white, and some of them are starting to get translucent. That white means they're still going to be pungent and like crunchier. Once they start getting translucent, they'll be softer, their flavor will be more mellow. So it's very important to do that. Let's work on our glaze for our scones. We are going to make a blueberry lime glaze. I got my powdered sugar.
You got a question? What do you clean your cooktop with?
So I clean my cooktop with pretty much just soap and water. Occasionally we get a little mishap while we're on vacation. My mom and stepdad were watching over my house and somehow they turned on the stove. So this is gonna take a while before it's back to normal. But most of the time it's doing this. This is gonna need some like Cerama Bright and like a razor blade to scrape it off. I just haven't gotten to it. I'm glad my house did not burn down on there. I think she must have just, or according to her, it must have been the cat. It could have been the cat. More logically, I think somebody rubbed up against the stove and accidentally turned on the burner to like below. Again, very thankful my house is still here. But my plants got watered, so that's all that really matters. Okay, let's make our lime glaze. We're gonna start with, actually I wanna start with my blueberry powder because it's easier to mix.
You have a question? Are you Hungarian?
I am not Hungarian. My family ancestry is actually Swedish, Norwegian, so kind of in that like European there. I might look like it. Everyone says it's because my high cheekbones. I always get Russian a lot too, but no, Swedish is my heritage. My mom was actually born in Sweden. So we're gonna start with my blueberry powder. This is just freeze-dried blueberries. Love it. It will add a very mellow sweetness to it, and of course a really pretty flavor or like color. We're gonna do about a tablespoon in it, and we're gonna mix it with the lime juice and a little bit of lime zest. So I'm gonna zest my lime up first. We don't need a whole lot. It will add a little couple specks of green and just a little zing, but the lime juice actually works really well with flavoring up the glaze, and you don't need a lot. So I've got my lime zest in there, probably just about a half a teaspoon, not too much. Sometimes it can be a bit overpowering, and the lime juice is gonna really work on here. And now we're gonna squeeze in our fresh lime juice. You gotta use fresh. You can't use that true lime or anything like this. It just doesn't work. It has more of a chemical flavor to it. So we're gonna do one whole lime in this. And then we're gonna take a pause to stir my onions. And then we'll mix this up. And then we'll add in some powdered sugar. And then a little bit of cream, which will kind of mellow out the zing so it's not super strong, but it will still have a nice lime flavor to it. Okay, let's get these onions. And then we're gonna go grab our scones because they look like they are just about ready. Okay, my onions are pretty much translucent now, so before we go grab our scones, I'm gonna throw my peppers in.
You have a quick question? Where can they find the blueberry powder?
Amazon. I actually have it added to my Amazon storefront, which is on my profile page. There's a link to it. And I think it's under like baking essentials or cooking essentials. But Amazon is where you got it. I have it in a whole bunch of different flavors. I've got dragon fruit, raspberry, butterfly pea, which gives you a really pretty color, but it kind of has no flavor. But they have a wide selection. You can use them in baking as well as in like smoothies. I use them a lot in glazes. I hear you. Look at our gorgeous blueberry lime scones. I'm gonna pop these out. They've got just a little bit of golden brown to the top of them because that's where from the cream. Big thing with scones is you don't want to overbake them. If you overbake them, they kind of get hard and crunchy. So I have found my 18 minutes is like perfect for them. So we've got it with our sourdough discard in it. We did, we brushed them all with cream and we did a little bit, a sprinkle of sugar on them. And those kind of fresh blueberries will be popping their flavor in it. So once we drizzle them with glaze, it brings you just that extra.
You have a question? Where did you learn to make Hungarian chicken?
You know what? I actually learned this recipe. It was featured in a fine cooking magazine in like 2000 something. It was in high school. And they had a soup of the balcony, Bacony Outlaws, and they had this little Hungarian dish. And that's kind of where I started from, was the base of it. And then I've kind of just created it to make it my own over the years. But I told you, I was a big fan of fine cooking magazines and gourmet, and I learned a lot from there. And then you just, over time, I feel like you experiment and you learn. So here is the base. And now I'm gonna add in my powdered sugar. We're gonna start with a half a cup at a time, not too much, but we're gonna add our powdered sugar in first before we add our cream, because if you add the cream to the lime juice, it will curdle, versus if you add the sugar in, then it's not going to be curdle as quickly. And we're aiming for a texture that's about the consistency of Elmer's glue. And I typically use about a cup of powdered sugar, give or take a little bit, to make my glazes. You don't need more than that. So always start with a little bit of liquid, because powdered sugar can take a very little bit of liquid to dissolve it. We're gonna add in about a teaspoon or so of cream. This is just gonna mellow out that kind of astringent, like that really tartness of the lime juice, to make it a bit more smooth. There we go. We're actually getting a pretty good consistency. I'm gonna add a little bit more powdered sugar, because it's just a teensy bit runny. But I think we'll probably end up using just about 3/4 of a cup, not too much in here. And then I think mixing it with a fork or a whisk works better than a spoon, because it allows you to break up those clumps of powdered sugar. Or you could always go in with a sifter and sift it so you don't have any chunks, but they'll all dissolve within time. Here we go. This is about the perfect consistency. It's got a slow run on it, and we'll be able to drizzle that over our scones in just a second here. Let's give our peppers and our onions a quick little stir. And I'm doing this all over about a 7 out of 10, so a medium high to high heat. That way we're getting this kind of quick little like sears off on the onions, like where I can see you got that little brown, little crispiness. Will add a lot of flavor. With this, you're not really cooking them until they're soft and falling apart. You kind of want to leave a little bit of that tender crunch to it. I'm gonna slice up my mushrooms real quick so we can add them in here. Then we're gonna glaze our scones, and we're gonna be kind of on the home stretch of our meal. So I've got some mushrooms because the paprika plays so well with them, and I love to use baby bellas because I think they have a nice, more earthier flavor, but white button mushrooms work great with this. I would not waste an expensive mushroom like chanterelles or shiitake on these. These two kind of are perfect for it. They give you that mushroom body, but they're not the star of the show. There. I'm gonna add these in real quick. Kind of let them saute. Give this all a nice little stir. You can smell those peppers kind of taking in that flavor. And I just want to make sure we're coated up because we want the mushrooms to all get a kind of a good saute on them real quick. And now let's glaze our blueberry lime scones with our blueberry lime glaze. So we're getting a lot of this flavor throughout in here. So again, we've got a good viscosity to this, and we're just gonna drizzle it over the top. And you wanna do it while your scones are still warm so that the heat of it helps kind of continue to melt it over the edge. So it's not like a frosting. You really want it to be a thin kind of glaze at the end, not a thick frosting. And if you wait until your scones are cold, it won't melt over. There we go. But again, this is So delicious. And this is gonna really give you that really lime flavor on the scones. Remember, we did add lime juice, 1 whole lime, and the zest from 1 whole lime in it. But lime juice bakes out really easy and it doesn't leave a strong flavor behind. So this glaze is gonna give you that zing. And we are almost to the very end. Teddy, his favorite thing is to actually eat this glaze at the end. He just loves dipping his finger in it over and over to eat it. But perfect, delicious glaze. Now let's finish up our kind of the rest of this. I'm gonna give this a nice little stir, and we're gonna turn the heat back on, and we're gonna add in our cheese for our cheesy Gouda polenta. So I'm gonna turn this down. I'm gonna get my back burner on too low. We'll add it in there, and I've got some shredded Gouda, which I think plays really well. It's not a strong flavored cheese, so it's not too overpowering, but I think it's delicious. We're gonna add in, I'm gonna start with about a cup of Gouda. We'll mix it in, and then we'll add in a little bit more towards the end. But we want it to kind of slowly melt into our polenta to give us a nice cheesy polenta. You can see it's got a more fluffy of a texture. It's not super dense, and that was just 1 cup. Okay, let's get this dough on the road. Give this a nice little stir, and then I'm gonna make a little pit in the middle here. We're gonna add in some tomato paste. We'll have our tomatoes sweating in just a second. But this is gonna be like a fresher, like chicken mushroom paprika versus like one that's a really stewed one. So we've got about a tablespoon of our tomato paste in here. And now we are going to add in our paprika. I'm gonna shake this all around, but you wanna kind of heat up the tomato paste. And we're gonna add in about a tablespoon and a half of paprika. This is where the flavor is gonna go. If your paprika is old, you're gonna wanna add a bit more because flavors dull out kind of the longer they've sat. I'm gonna add in a little bit of onion powder, just a couple of good shakes around, maybe like a teaspoon or so. And add in a little bit of garlic salt. Again, a good shake around. Probably a teaspoon. And we're gonna give this, stir it up, kind of let that tomato paste kind of season up in there. Let me grab my onion that popped over. And then we're gonna add in our tomatoes, and then we're gonna make our sour cream base for it. And then we'll throw our chicken back in, and we are about at the very end. Okay. So we've got that kind of heating up in there. I'm going to add my tomatoes in, which will sweat out and give us a little bit of liquid into it. Perfect. You can see it's already starting. You can smell the flavors. We'll let those cook while we prep our sour cream. And okay, we're gonna add a little bit. So I've got about a half a cup of water, which this had milk in it, so it doesn't matter because we're gonna be adding in some more milk, and I didn't want to waste the dish. But that had the milk in it that we used in our Gouda grits. We're gonna add in a little bit of chicken bouillon. This is gonna give you some nice flavoring in there as well. I want a big heaping spoonful.
You have a question? When do you go live in the evening?
It varies pretty much of our kind of kids' schedule, but it's typically around 8-ish, give or take 15 or so minutes. It just depends on how our day goes when we eat lunch. Yes, Central Time. Okay, so we've got our chicken bouillon in here. We're gonna add a little bit of cream in here, about, I wanna say maybe 2 tablespoons or so. And then our sour cream. And get another spoon to scoop this in here. We want about half a cup of sour cream. The tartness of this is gonna really play kind of well with our flavors. There we go. And then, before I mix it up, our thickener is flour. And you wanna mix it into here, because if you try to put your flour in there, what will happen is it's going to kind of make a dumpling. So we're gonna add about 2 tablespoons of flour to this. And then we're gonna mix it up. And then when this hits the heat, that flour will congeal with the fat and the sour cream as well as the oil we use, and it will thicken up. And there we go. And this is gonna make our kind of our delicious base to our sauce. And then we have all those spices in there.
You have a question? Why'd you put the chicken bouillon in the water first?
That's so it can start to dissolve right away. If I put it after it's thicker, then it's really viscous and it doesn't dissolve as easily. But that way it can mix up well. So now we've got our nice kind of our thick liquid here. I'm gonna turn mine down to about a 4 or 5. We're just gonna add in a little bit at a time so I can start to kind of mix it up. But you can see it's starting to turn those rich colors from that paprika in here. And then once we have this to a nice stewing boil, I'll test it to see if we need to add any salt or pepper to it, and then we can throw our chicken right back in, and it should be ready to eat. You want to do this part towards the end so you don't split your sauce.
You have a question. Could you use cornstarch instead of flour to thicken it?
You could definitely use cornstarch instead of thickening it. You'll just want to make sure you dissolve that cornstarch really well into the chicken broth first, because if you try to do it into the flour, it will congeal and then or into the sour cream, it won't mix up as well. So just do it in the chicken broth first. But yes, you could definitely do this, especially to make it like a gluten-free meal. So here we've got our lovely kind of base. And so you have that flavors from the paprika. I'm gonna taste it and then we'll add in our chicken. And then we will add in the last bit of cheese and we'll be ready to serve up. Let me grab a spoon. Here. Doesn't need anything else. You've got the saltiness from the garlic salt and the chicken bouillon. Let's add in our chicken. Let this kind of pick up. Now, we added our sour cream in. We're gonna let it stew for just about 30 seconds or so, and then I'm gonna turn off the heat, because if you cook cream or a sour cream too long, it will start to split, and we want this to have a nice, creamy, smooth sauce. As you can see, it looks so delicious. Now, I'm serving this with creamy polenta. You could serve this over pasta or potatoes, rice. It actually can go over lots of things. We've got this. Let's check out our cheesy polenta. You can see all that cheese. Look at that Gouda in there, that nice cheese pull on it. I actually don't think we even need much more. Might add a sprinkle more on it, and then we're gonna serve up. Okay, now we are ready to serve up. Let me grab my plate. And we're going to have our lunch.
So you have a question? When you eat such a late lunch, do you have a big dinner or a smaller dinner?
We typically eat like 2 main meals a day, and that's really it. So we'll have our big lunch, but we eat late, so it'll be like 5 hours before we have dinner time. But I only make 2 meals a day. I always tell my kids, so they're on their own for breakfast or lunch, depending if I make a brunch. And let's see, this guy does not want to scoop up for us. So here is our cheesy polenta. Look at that. All of that delicious Gouda in here. So we're going to spread it out. Get my cheese pull. So you want to spread it out because we're going to put this on here. There we go. And now we're going to scoop our chicken mushroom paprika full of bell peppers, onions, and you're gonna put this scoop right over this. Also, we are making a lot of food for a big family, so this isn't just feeding like 4 people. This is feeding about 8 people today, so we go through a lot. Now we've got our chicken mushroom paprika right here, and of course, we'll have our delicious blueberry lime scones on here. Look at those nice flaky layers in the middle with that glaze on the top. Absolutely delicious. So pretty easy, delicious meal for lunch today. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, the best way to do that is to go search for the video's name, like Hungarian chicken mushroom paprika, and then you can cook along with me again at home. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our pans, a lot of our specialty ingredients that we use, like I have my blueberry powder in there, but you can always check that out as well. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to